What's going on, football fans? We are back with the Air It Out podcast. Super excited to be on, talking with my boys again. I'm your humble host, Jerome Jones. We got my man Avery Collins right over here. How you doing, Avery?
Man, I'm good. Couldn't complain. I'm out here just living life, waiting to see what's going to happen. Number 4 overall.
We're gonna
Two
talk
more
about
weeks,
the
y'all.
draft, man. Two more
Two
weeks.
more weeks.
We're gonna definitely talk about the draft. Let's introduce the coach, my man Darren Braxton. How you doing, Darren?
You already know what it is, baby. Big Charles all day. Listen, we're gonna make it simple. You see the squad.
Representing.
Still repping them.
Representing. That's what's up. That's what's up.
Man,
We got my guy over
gang
here.
signs up like that.
Huh?
Looked like he was just throwing gang signs up and whatnot.
Listen. I gotta rep the gang. Gotta rep both of them, you know? Big Charles, baby, all that.
Just so you know, we are not gang affiliated here, guys. So just so you know, we're very wholesome, nice guys. Okay? Just very wholesome, nice guys. And we got my guy over here, Darius Riddick, aka Derek. How you doing,
It was
man?
Derek. That's my alter ego. Derek is going to be on the show today. Darius will be on next week. That's all I'm saying, man.
Oh, so we got Derek today. Okay. Last week I thought we had Derek on, but we had Darius, so I guess it's Derek today, not Darius. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes because I might call you Derek again. You never know. But I am super excited to be here because you guys already know 2 more weeks to the NFL draft. I'm super excited. We even got a comment in already. He's not a Hall of Fame in the story. We're gonna talk about that. We must be talking about the header that we just put in for there. We're gonna talk about the whole Hall of Fame thing in a second, guys. But I definitely want to check in with everybody. How excited are y'all? Like 2 more weeks into the draft, it's feeling like it just flew here. I y'all already know I'm super excited. How y'all feeling right now?
I'm excited, man. It's after like the first couple of weeks of free agency, it's like that's what we look forward to, the draft. And it's like after that first 2 weeks, it's like what else is going on? But the draft is going to be exciting just because we don't know what a lot of teams are going to do with their picks. Like Atlanta is one team that could possibly trade down, right? Denver is a possible team that wants to trade up. New England's another team, right? What will Philly do? Especially the Eagles, like, are they going to draft a quarterback? Are they going to draft a wide receiver? Are they going to go defense? There's so many question marks with this year's draft. And I'm excited because I think fans are allowed back and you get to see some of the players actually shake the commissioner's hands this year, something that we were actually robbed of last year. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited too. What do you think? How you feeling, Darren?
Give us another wide out. Give me one more.
That's how I'm feeling.
Give me one more. Smith or Bateman. I'm cool with either one. Either one I'll work with. But give me one more.
How you feeling, Avery?
Man, I'm nervous. I'm nervous, man. I'm nervous because I don't want them to squander this. I don't want them to make some stupid mistake. Like if Kyle Pitts is there and you take him, I'm gonna be a happy man. If you trade back, I'm gonna be a happy man. But if y'all go out and draft a quarterback, I'm not gonna be mad, but I'm not gonna be happy. I'm like, come on, man. Like just what I don't listen. Anything other than like a top corner, Kyle Pitts or trading back, I'm gonna be upset, So I don't know. I'm nervous. I hope we play this right, man. Like that's it.
Definitely. Yeah, we're gonna definitely talk about that. Real quick, I want to do a quick rundown, real quick. Clowney has signed to the Browns. I want to get your quick initial thoughts on that. Make that really real quick because we got other topics to get into. Avery, I'm gonna start with you. What do you think about the Clowney signing?
I think that is a phenomenal signing. I think you put him on the side alongside Myles Garrett. That's going to be obviously now you gotta worry about the other side. So now he's going to potentially see less double teams. So I think it's going to be good. And Jadeveon Clowney is great in the run game as well. I think it's a phenomenal fit.
What about you, Darius?
I agree with Avery, man. I think it's a phenomenal fit. It really just comes down to Jadeveon Clowney's health. If this guy can go in and stay healthy, you're looking at a double-digit sack type of guy, and then you got Myles Garrett.
Darren is sick.
Darren is sick because now he has to play against Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett twice a year. But I think it's a great signing, and especially if he can perform well, he sets himself up with a nice little payday if he can perform and stay healthy.
Yeah.
I'm sick twofold. I'm sick on two different reasons. The first one being that I don't feel like dealing with him twice a year, along with Myles Garrett. He wasn't getting sacks before, but now with Myles Garrett, if he doesn't have a double-digit season, yeah, that's how I feel. I want to right now, but it's not just because of the simple fact if that guy doesn't have 10-digit sacks, then he's going to be for me a bust. But
Chris,
thank you. Say it again. Help me. Help me. And this is the thing. Jadeveon Clowney could have helped us because us, the Browns, and I believe it was the Colts, who were in the league talking basically to Clowney to bring him in. We could have had him. So to lose out on him, and then not only to lose out on him, but have him go to the Browns.
Well, from one man's sorrow to a next man's sorrow, we're going to talk about the next topic. This is the big topic that we have on this podcast right now is Julian Edelman retires. I'm sorry, Darius. I don't know how you feel about that. I'm going to let you go first. He retires. It's big speculation on is he a Hall of Famer. We're going to get to the second part right after this, but I want to know how you feel about the retirement, Darius.
As a Patriots fan, in the last 24 months or 18 months, we lost Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, and Julian Edelman. And those guys, Gronk and Brady, went on to win the Super Bowl their first year, and Edelman, obviously, he retired. But I think, it's sad, but, he knows his body more than anybody else. The man's I think he's 35 years old. He only played 6 games. He only played 6 games last year, and his knee has been an issue for the last 2 years. So I think it's a situation where he knows his body. He knows that he's got to kind of compete with the younger guys like Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers. He's going to have to actually compete at some capacity. But I'm happy for him. He's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He was one of the toughest players in the NFL, and he was probably one of the best slot receivers during his time when he actually was playing and he was fully healthy. So it's sad to see him go, but I'm happy that he was able to retire and not go join Tom Brady in Tampa Bay.
I can only imagine how you feel right now, just having all your people just leaving within the last 2 years, and then watching 2 of them get a Super Bowl. It's rough right now for you,
Heartbreaking.
man. It's rough for you. But guy, I'm gonna go to Darren last because he probably already gonna say he is. But Darren, is he a Hall of Famer? Do he deserve Hall of Fame talks?
So, can y'all answer me this? When was Julian Edelman ever a top 10 wide receiver in the league? In any year of his career? Any year of his career. Can y'all say he was a top 10 wide receiver in the league? When?
I think he had 1 year.
Give me the year. Give me the year that he was a top 10 wide receiver. Not just on stats, because Tom Brady threw him the ball a ridiculous amount of time. You had basically 2 weapons in him and Rob Gronkowski to throw the ball to. And then you had, James White out the backfield. So, other than those 2, he was the main target. And he looked for him too much, for me personally. But when was he an actual top 10 wide receiver? Period. Not just slot receiver. I'm talking period. Can you name 1 year? Name the year, Avery. I would love to hear it. Just name the year.
Avery, you're up. How you feel about his campaign for Hall of Fame?
Well, to answer Darren's question, I would say 2018, 2019.
Nope.
He was ridiculous. Now, am I saying for sure he was a top 10 wide receiver? Absolutely not. But is there a case for him to be a top 10 receiver in that time period? Absolutely, yes. And that's my point, right? I say that because people were making the debate, is Tyreek Hill a top 10 receiver at that time, and different things like that. Julian Edelman, again, regardless of why, he had the numbers there, and he was threatening people, point blank, period. He was threatening people at all levels, intermediate. Well, not all levels. He wasn't going deep, but intermediate and short routes, you couldn't stop him. And he was the best in the league at that. He was at least top 3 in slot in that. So that in and of itself could potentially warrant him saying, I had a top 10, status at that time. But as far as Gronk said, there's a 69% chance that he'll come down to Tampa Bay. Obviously he was trolling there, but we'll see. But as far as Hall of Fame, let me just read off some stats here. Julian Edelman retired with less receptions than Jarvis Landry, less yards than Jeremy Maclin, less touchdowns than Marvin Jones Jr., the same amount of rings as James White, the same amount of Super Bowl MVPs as Malcolm Smith. He has less Pro Bowls than Mitchell Trubisky. He retired with, like I said, less career yards than Jeremy Maclin, less career receptions than Michael Crabtree, and less career touchdowns than Pierre Garçon. Now, with that being said, all of those things, you don't make him a Hall of Famer. Now, eye test, you look at him, you're like, yeah, he was dominant. Point blank, period. You cannot deny he was dominant on the field. I think the biggest thing is the playoffs. He's behind only Jerry Rice in receiving yards and receptions in NFL history. Only Jerry Rice has more. But that's not enough for me to make him a Hall of Fame wide receiver. I don't think he makes it. If they do, then I think there's so many other players that need to make it. I love Julian Edelman. I love the fact that he won a Super Bowl and not just won 3 Super Bowls, but he also won a Super Bowl MVP. So he had a phenomenal career, but I don't think it's Hall of Fame worthy.
Go ahead, Derek.
I'll make this real quick. No, he's not a Hall of Famer. Yes, the main case for him is the playoffs. But as Avery said, when you look at everything else, this guy was not there. He never even made it to a Pro Bowl. A Pro Bowl. Everyone gets invited to the Pro Bowl this day and age. So you can't make it to one of those. I'm sorry, I can't give it to you.
I mean, you also got to remember the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl is a different type of scenario, right? With the voting and how that works, and the names, right? And so it's like you said.
Has he ever been an All-Pro?
It's a situation. I'm not sure about that, but no. the point.
Never been an All-Pro. Never been a Pro Bowl.
The point is, we've seen Jarvis Landry be essentially undervalued because he played in the slot a lot. We've seen a lot of these slot guys get undervalued for what they did. And so it's a situation until you see them perform in the playoffs like Julian Edelman. You see what he did in the Super Bowl, and then you're like, oh, snap. Maybe he should have been in the Pro Bowl. Oh, snap. Maybe he should have such and such, right? So I'm not going to hold that against him, but I will say that I don't believe that he's a Hall of Fame caliber, receiver.
All right, Darius, bring us home.
Is he a Patriots Hall of Famer? Absolutely. Absolutely. He's done everything for that organization. Is he a Hall of Famer? Let me ask you this. Is Reggie Wayne in the Hall of Fame? No. Is Hines Ward in the Hall of Fame?
Before you say this.
No. These are two guys who had.
Before you finish your statement, let me read out this list because I have a list right here.
Okay, go ahead.
Here. Torrey Hall, Andre Rison, Jimmy Smith, Sherlin Sharp, Hines Ward, Isaac Bruce, Andre Johnson, Drew Pearson, Steve Smith Sr., and Quan Bolden. Go ahead.
Those are guys who could make a stronger case for Julian Edelman. And as much as I love Julian Edelman, he was never the best player at his position, right? Like he was never. Again, you could say you can make a case, Avery, a top 10 in 2018. Okay, you can make a case. But I'm saying the stats, no All Pro selections, no first team, second team, none of that, no Pro Bowls. Like the numbers, and then the numbers aren't even in a little bit in his favor outside of the playoffs. So I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Chris said it. I don't know why they're trying to push this narrative. And I'm a diehard Patriots fan, and I understand, but I'll argue to this: he's not a Hall of Famer. He's not.
Now, if these guys get in the Hall of Fame, does it now make him a Hall of Famer?
You can now. It's like you can make a case. Do I think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame? There's a possibility that he gets voted in, but in my opinion, I don't think he is. I don't think he's deserving just because of the numbers. Yes, he was. You look at the playoff, he was like kind of like LeBron James in the playoffs. We saw a different animal when he was in the playoffs, but again, that's because of who was throwing him the ball. Tom Brady. Who else he had over there? It's Rob Gronkowski, James White, all those weapons. He had a hell of a career. He's going to be in the Patriots Hall of Fame, but I just don't think the Hall of Fame talk, we got to cut that narrative right now. And I think it's really just because of the three Super Bowl wins and the Super Bowl MVP is why he's in that conversation. You take those out, that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so. And I think that's like the main thing that people's main argument was that he had 3 Super Bowls. He's a very productive receiver, blah, blah, blah. But for me, if looking at that list, these guys are just waiting in the wings to get in the Hall of Fame. And as it already is, it's hard for wide receivers to get into the Hall of Fame as it is. You got to be one of the top guys. If not, you're waiting. So we got there's a long list of guys. And, Chris added Derek Mason as well. I know
Andre Johnson not being in the Hall of Fame is pure robbery, period.
It is.
Steve Smith Sr. too, man. Like
Steve Smith Sr. too.
And the reason why I highlighted his name a little bit, because he's a smaller receiver like Julian Edelman. So like a lot of other guys are bigger guys. Steve Smith Jr. came into the league as a punt returner, so you can make that case for him. He didn't win a Super Bowl. He did go to a Super Bowl with the Panthers one year, and got cheated by the Patriots. But speaking of the AFC, we're gonna go to our segment that we had last week, which was what moves will make X team a contender, and we're gonna talk about the AFC edition of that. So what move will make one of these teams a contender? So basically, if they draft somebody, if there's somebody still in free agency, you already seen Clowney go to the Browns. So you could actually add that into the equation, since we didn't talk about it, just happened this week. What move a team can make right now to make them a contender? I'm gonna start with you, Darius. Which one do you think?
I mean, I don't really count this as I feel like they were more of a contender last year, but this makes them give them a bigger chance. It's really the Browns, and it's what they did in the offseason, bringing in some guys to beef up that secondary from the Rams, and then you add in Jadeveon Clowney. Now it's like, okay, now it really comes to our defense is good. Now let's see what we really can do on our offense. Obviously, Odell's going to come back, so that's going to be a huge plus. They still got the running game going with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. It really just comes down to Baker Mayfield. Another team, and I think if they make this move, and it really just depends on how this quarterback plays. I think if the Ravens draft actually a number 1 wide receiver, and you give Lamar a number 1, because the thing with the Ravens really is Lamar just doesn't have a number 1. That's been the whole story. Can't get Lamar Jackson a number 1 wide receiver and let him go to work. So I think if the Ravens go into this draft and they potentially maybe trade up, or the top guy starts to slip down and they don't have to trade up and they don't have to give away future draft picks, and they get Lamar number 1, I think you see this Ravens team really become a contender in the AFC, and they become another threat. And I'm gonna be a homer. I'm gonna say my Patriots, just because I think on defense, with the opt-outs coming back, adding a lot of key guys on offense. You look at what they added. The main question is really is what they're gonna do with the 15th overall pick, and it really just depends on what Cam Newton. But if they decide to go defense and draft, let's say J.C. Horn, and you add him, Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson, this is a team that, again, you're gonna circle New England and be like, we're afraid to play these guys, especially because Cam Newton is coming back with a full offseason, a full training camp, and weapons. So those are my 3 teams that if they make the right moves, they'll be contenders.
What about you, Avery?
All right. Well, obviously, the Browns. Obviously, that's a good one right there. If they can work that thing out with Jadeveon Clowney and Baker continues to progress and Odell comes back and doesn't essentially inhibit his growth and stuff like that, then yeah, the Browns are definitely a team that could be scary. But for me, I think it's really three teams. And number one, I'm going to say is the Chargers. I think if the Chargers can have a fully healthy defense and Justin Herbert can take a step forward, he was a great first half quarterback last year. I think if he can continue to progress and play well in the second half, continue to score points, continue to make the right reads, not turn the ball over, they can run the ball well and control the clock when they do have leads. I think the Chargers can definitely be somebody that no team wants to face. I think the Broncos are another team. If they can get the quarterback situation together, they've got enough weapons. They've got Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant. They've got Melvin Gordon. They've got a ton of weapons there on offense. If they can get the quarterback situation and the offensive line situation together, we know that defense with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, they're gonna ball. They're gonna put pressure on people. So I think the Broncos could definitely be a team that you might want to look out for. I was going to say the Colts, but I feel like they already are contenders, right? I think they just need to take the next step. I think with Carson Wentz, they potentially can do that. So I was going to say them, but I'll flip it and I'll say the Miami Dolphins. I think the Dolphins, if they can get some better QB play out of Tua and more consistent play out of Tua Tagovailoa, and they can get some more weapons around him, I think the Dolphins can definitely be a contender in the AFC. I think because
100%.
Denver winning the AFC West. I'm calling it now.
But
especially this man over here. Listen, every year.
I'm not going to go that far. I think they can be contenders though. But like I said, with the Dolphins, we saw what they did on the back end. Byron Jones and Xavier Howard had phenomenal years last year. Their secondary was really good. I think their linebacker play is getting better. They obviously still need some pass rush, but I think they have enough to, like I said, to contend if they are able to get more consistent play on the offense, maybe put some points up. If you put more points up, teams are going to have to pass more, and with those two corners, it's going to be difficult for you to do that. So I think that the Dolphins, if they figure it out, I think they can be contenders.
I left Darren last because we already know what he's going to say, but I'm going to let you talk. Go ahead, Darren.
So I'm actually going to breeze over the first two, which was already kind of taken by my man Darius over here. The Browns move was already Clowney. That's what they really needed. They needed that second edge rush threat for Myles Garrett. That was very, very simple. And with the move they already made in free agency, they are now a good contender to not only make the playoffs, but advance in the playoffs somewhat. Especially if Baker continues to grow as he was last year toward the end of the year. My second one is, you already know, I say it every time I'm on here. Give my man Lamar a number one wideout. And if not a number one wideout, give us another Terrell Suggs or a true edge threat. Our defense has been based off of blitzing too much and it's burnt us somewhat in times recently. So if we can get an outstanding number one edge threat guy that's going to truly get double-digit sacks almost every year, that will help take some of the pressure off of that defense to have to blitz so much, which will allow our linebackers like Patrick Queen to now sit back more in coverage and allow our corners to do what they do best. So that's my first two. But my guys that I really want to see do well and I think can do well with these moves are the Buffalo Bills can be possibly a Super Bowl contender if they get an outstanding number one corner to go along with Trey White, as well as because they have contenders. Listen, and this is why I said Super Bowl contenders.
They were in the AFC title game.
Full Super Bowl contenders because they still were missing 2 or 3 pieces. The only other piece I can think of is a running back. An outstanding running back to really go ahead and balance that attack. So it's not all just on Josh Allen. Give them a guy like Najee Harris. Can y'all say right now that he might be the missing piece for them in that Super Bowl run? They have all the wideouts they need. They have a solid tight end in Dawson Knox. The offensive line's reset. And Josh Allen, if he grows more, it's just ridiculous. And the last piece.
I get that.
And the last piece.
Go ahead.
And this one is only because of what they did in the offseason. If the Chiefs go ahead and get 2 offensive tackles that are great, then yes. But what are they going to do? Because right now, we all know with that last Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs were ridiculously bad. And it wasn't.
They were in the Super Bowl.
You're right. But how are you going to make it back there with no tackles? You have no starting tackles.
Listen, until they can show that they're not contenders, they are still contenders. And I meant to answer the actual question: what moves would make a team, X team, a contender in AFC? This is the only one. I think that honestly, if they made this move, they would be my Super Bowl favorite in the AFC. If the Broncos somehow were able to land Deshaun Watson, they would be my Super Bowl favorite. I would pick them over the Chiefs, straight up. But that's just me.
They do have Kyle Fuller, people. They do have Kyle Fuller.
Exactly. That's what I said last week. That defense.
Well, speaking of the Broncos and Von Miller, who was a second overall pick, that's going to lead us into our last segment of the day. Is there such thing as a second overall curse? Now, this is something that I've seen somebody put on YouTube before. I'm sorry for not knowing the YouTuber's name. So if you're watching, credits to you for this segment. But he put out a video about all the second round picks that didn't pan out, and he said there was a second round overall pick. Second overall curse. And I wanted to bring this to light. Our fellow inside the hashes guy, Juan, we miss you, but your Jets are in this position right now. So if you're watching, we want to know how you feel about this as well. But before I let you guys talk, let me read off some of the names. Now, if you're looking at this, the last 2 guys, you can't really put a big, consistency on it because, they just got in the league. But if you are not basically Calvin Johnson or a defensive end, you have not done well the last couple of picks. So 2020 was Chase Young. 2021 was Nick Bosa, who came off an injury. Just came off an injury. We got 2018 Saquon Barkley, been injury riddled. We got Mitchell Trubisky, who's not on the team no more. We have Carson Wentz, who's not on the team no more. We have not on their original teams. That's what I meant. Marcus Mariota, not on his original team. Greg Robertson, not on his original team. Luke Jokel, who's still on the Jaguars, I believe, but haven't played to that potential. We got RG3, who's a backup for the Ravens. We got Reggie Miller. Obviously, he's a really good one. And like I said, if he's not an edge rusher, or Calvin Johnson. Then we got Ndamukong Suh, edge rusher, defensive end or defensive tackle. Then we got Jason Smith, offensive tackle from the Rams. We got Chris Long on defensive end for the Rams. Calvin Johnson, Reggie Bush, who didn't live up to his hype. Ronnie Brown, Robert Gallery, Charles Rogers, Julius Pepper, again, defensive end, played really well. Leonard Davis, guard for Texas. The Cardinals. LeVar Arrington and McNabb was 1999. So even after that, Ryan Leaf was the guy right before that. And there's a couple other names that if you could kind of go back, there was not a lot of second overall picks. So do you guys think that there is a second overall pick curse outside of defensive ends at least? I'm going to start off with Avery. What do you think about this?
No, I don't think it's real. I think there's some merit to the question, if that is in fact something, but I don't think that it's I don't think it's a curse. I think it's a situation where it's really, really tough to draft in that spot. It's really tough to make that decision. Do we trade back? Do we take the best available? Do we take the position need? What do we do in that spot, right? typically the number one overall is going to be the dire need of the team, right? So typically it's going to be a quarterback or an edge rusher or something like that, right? It's typically not going to be a lineman or a linebacker or a running back or it's going to be typically something that is a foundational part of your franchise. So that number two, it's like, okay, if they end up doing that or don't do it, it's like, okay, now what do we do? How do we operate here? And as you stated, I guess the most recent ones with Chase Young, Bosa, and I would even throw Saquon Barkley in there as well. Those three guys are phenomenal players when they're on the field. Like there's no doubt about it. They're phenomenal players when they're on the field. You mentioned Calvin Johnson being the coup de grace right there, right? Like he was phenomenal. Yeah. But I think it's a situation where teams just have to be better at drafting in that spot, more so than it is a curse. But I think with what we're seeing with Saquon, Nick, and Chase, if they can stay on the field, to me that means there is absolutely no curse because those are three home runs if they're healthy and pan out the way that we kind of expect them to do. So. Yeah, I think there's merit, but I don't believe that there's a curse to it.
What do you think, Darius?
I agree with Avery. I don't really think it's a curse. Again, it's difficult, especially when you have the number 2 overall pick. Do you trade back? Do I go for the best available? Do I go for the position? It's a couple of guys who were number 2, and you look at them and you're like, okay, this guy played pretty well, and then it's just a couple of unfortunate circumstances. Carson Wentz, right? This guy was an MVP caliber player. Like, he had an MVP type season. He got injured. Then we look at Then we look at what was going on in the locker room, and you put him in a situation now where he's in a better environment with a guy who, with his former offensive coordinator as his head coach. So I think when you look at that. When you look at it from that perspective, it's like, nah, it's really not a curse. Saquon, obviously, with the injury, Joey with the injury. But when these guys are on the field, there's an argument that you could say, hey, this guy's the best player at his position. Saquon, when he's on the field, there is an argument that this guy's the best running back in the game. It's just unfortunate that, obviously, he's hurt. But I personally don't think it's a curse. It's just a little bit of guys not really living up to the hype, and then you could kind of flip and say there's a curse with the first overall pick with a couple of busts. Jamarcus Russell, he was a bust. So many players that were drafted number 1, and you look back and you're like, you didn't really pan out the way we thought. So again, it's just all about how you draft.
We don't speak that name.
Exactly.
Bust.
It's just how teams go out there and draft. So. And then you look at the skill players that were drafted number 2, they panned out pretty well. So,
Now, Darren, I know that you did a little research on this when we talked about it. How do you feel about this curse? Is there any merit to it, or you think it's just
so? I'm not going to be as cut and dry as the other 2 guys here because I believe there is a bit of merit to it, but it's not more particularly on the teams, but the players themselves, because you have to understand this. When you're picked number 2, there is a psychological thing that happens where you feel as though, wow, I'm the runner-up. What is it though that I couldn't do to be number 1? And that starts to stick with some players. And you got to kind of understand that psychological thing that goes along with it. But then you have to not only go back to what happens with the guys that's recently come out with the Chase Youngs, the Nick Bosa, the Saquon Barkley. But the guy that was right before that as well, Ndamukong Suh was the number 2 overall pick. He was good. And at a point, he was great, but he was never that unstoppable beast that was supposed to be done.
What?
Because, listen, when he was coming out, he was somewhat advertised like he might be another Reggie White. Do you guys believe he was like another Reggie White when he was at his greatest?
When he
Absolutely.
was the best at his position.
Absolutely.
This man
when
was
he was at his greatest, I did not see Reggie White. But
you
I
gotta
did
remember
see
he was in Detroit. Name anybody else on Detroit that was good other than Ndamukong Suh and Matthew
And
Stafford.
I'm not saying, and that's why I said he got to be a good and even great player at some time, but not to the level of what he was hyped up to be. And I'm gonna just read some names off to you guys.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna read some names off. So we already know Calvin Johnson is the Hall of Famer. Von Miller, Julius Peppers. Those two guys will be most likely Hall of Famers when their time comes. Easily.
Absolutely.
Easily, correct?
And so will Sue.
And if you go even further back, another two guys that should be in the Hall of Fame, if not are not already in the Hall of Fame. And I believe they both are. Lawrence Taylor was the number 2 overall pick. Marshall Faulk. Both of those guys were also number 2 overall picks. But for every guy like that, you have the Ryan Leafs. You have the Tony Mandrakes of the world. The guys that came out with as much hype as possible, but was never able to truly live up to that potential. And then there were guys like the Carson Wentz's where they had great potential, things happened, and they were not able to succeed just yet. Now, Carson Wentz is a different story because he has still time to go ahead and live up to that hype. But if you just think about it like this, Tony Mandrake, okay, but not great. Mitchell Trubisky, at his best, he's going to be a backup for his career. Carson Wentz, one great year, good the rest of the time, but then had a horrible season last year, which he can possibly resurrect. RG3, great first year. Injury happened.
That was
the rest of his
coach.
Career to a backup.
His coach.
He's now regulated to a backup.
That wasn't his fault.
His coach.
And that's why I say it's not all about what the team does, but the player themselves. Because things happen, but you got to understand, there is somewhat of a case to this. And the last name I got, Ronnie Brown. Ronnie Brown was a good running back. But would y'all say Ronnie Brown was a great running back? And worth the number 2 overall pick?
No.
Let me add
to his argument just a little bit. Let me real quick, Avery. I want to add to his argument just a little bit, because I want to see what y'all two think about this. So we're saying that if the overall number 2 is a curse, that ties into the team too. You gotta remember, some of the players that we're talking about didn't stick with their teams. Ndamukong Suh did not stick with his team. So that second overall pick for that team, it will be a curse for that team. So the Lions having that second overall pick, taking Ndamukong Suh, it didn't pan out for them. So same thing with Carson Wentz. Same thing with you can say with a couple of other guys. They didn't stick with their team. So I want to know how do you feel about that aspect of it? Like, do you think team wise there's a curse?
I would. So let me make sure I cover everything. Ronnie Brown, I don't think should have been in the top 10. So I think that was just bad drafting, right? That was just horrible drafting. But to answer your question, Jerome, so in the case of some of the names that you mentioned, so Ndamukong Suh, right? Detroit is a horrible franchise. They're not a good franchise. They don't build well. Like Matthew Stafford, there's no reason Matthew Stafford should have not been retired a Detroit Lion, but because they're a horrible franchise, he's like, I can't keep doing this. Calvin Johnson should not have retired after 9 years, but he's like, I can't keep doing. Barry Sanders should not have retired after 9 years. I can't keep. If you're not going to help me, I'm out. And that's what Ndamukong Suh realized. He's like, I'm not going to keep doing this and have my career wasted and have people like Darren think that I'm not a top tier guy at my position because of the fact that I'm playing in Detroit, right? So I think that and then you go with the Eagles. We've seen over the last maybe decade, drafting wise, they're not doing well. They're missing the mark. Right, so I don't know if it's necessarily, like I said, a curse. More so, the teams that are taking these guys that are in the position to be able to be taking these guys are not hitting well. They're not drafting well. I don't think it's a positional situation. They just aren't drafting well. Like, there's no reason Ronnie Brown should have been taken number 2 overall. There's absolutely no reason. It makes sense why Saquon went. It makes sense why Nick Bosa went. It makes sense why Chase Young went. It makes sense why Calvin went. It makes sense why Ndamukong went. All of those picks make sense. The rest of them, you're like, I mean, honestly, when I was watching some of this, I'm like, Mitchell Trubisky, really? Did y'all know that there's this guy named Deshaun Watson? Did y'all forget?
Fire Howie.
Well, for me,
there
like,
it is.
I don't think it's a positional thing. I think it's a team thing where they don't draft. A lot of the teams that end up in that position are because they don't draft well. Like, think about it. The Patriots, they don't have number 2 overall picks. They draft well, right? Like, a lot of these teams are, when I say draft well, I mean, I'm talking about how they maneuver through the draft. They stockpile picks. They don't. I'm
about to say
that's my point. So my thing is,
Tony Mandrake was drafted by the Packers, and they both drafted Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre and multiple Hall of Fame players. So you can't even just say it's all the teams. You got select few teams that's like that, but it's not all. And I even got one more name for you, Reggie Bush.
Before you get to your one thing, because I'm gonna let you talk real quick, because I want to add to their argument real quick. You can actually add Carson Wentz as a good pick, because without him, you probably wouldn't have got a Super Bowl.
You don't have the Super Bowl.
Exactly. And then
what you say about that, Darren?
Exactly. And he just talked about Reggie Bush, but again, I was one of the only people saying Reggie Bush is great in college. He's not going to be that guy in the NFL. They don't care about your speed or your elusiveness. Everybody's fast when you get to that level. Period. And nobody wanted to listen to me. And I was like, he's going to be a gadget player, but nobody wanted to listen.
No, I'll answer the question because I stated this before. Carson Wentz had a great, phenomenal 2017 year. I stated he had a great year, but his other years have been at his best good. Good for a starting quarterback. But was it what the Eagles expected long term? They expected a franchise guy that they can have multiple 10 years plus with that number 2 overall pick. You got to remember what they gave up to get that. You got to remember what they gave up to get that. What did they give up to get to that number 2 overall pick to get Carson Wentz? And then for them to get rid of him, especially after getting him a massive contract, you got to think about it like that. You got to think about all of it encompassing, not just one thing. And then when I mentioned Reggie Bush, people were saying Reggie Bush is going to come out and be like another Gale Sayers, basically. That wasn't the case. Reggie Bush's best years were actually not at the Saints. It was when he was with the Dolphins and the Lions, when he actually hit 1,000 yards. His years with the Saints, at best, he was a gadget player.
Well, I could talk about the Eagles all day. I'm not even going to touch on this subject because we'll have a whole nother podcast. I need to figure out an Eagles podcast for myself so I can just ramble on myself. But guys, thank y'all so much. I just wanted to talk about that with the draft coming up, and I thought that was a really compelling argument. I think that it is something to look at. And I love looking back at drafts and seeing where guys went and stuff like that. Speaking of the draft, in 2 weeks with the draft day, before you watch the draft, come watch us because we will have a mock draft for you guys. So come back, see what we talk about, see what we get, who we picking with each teams and things like that on that day. So in 2 weeks. So check that out. Also, make sure you check us out next week. But if you are on YouTube right now, click that like and click that subscribe button. Hit the notification button as well so you can watch us each week. We come on Thursdays every Thursday at 6:00. And if you're not live and if you don't know if we're live, go on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Then you'll know when we're live. So you can see the drafts, you can see the mock drafts, you can see us teasing each other, and me calling Derek and stuff like that. So make sure you check that out. Like, subscribe right there as well. Also, make sure you check out all our social media on InsideTheHashes.com, as well as our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also check out our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Check that out. We got all that information down there. Check it out because we got a lot of player interviews. We just put out a big bombshell player today, which is a really good guy from the Senior Bowl. So check that out. We got a couple more coming up in the rankings right now. So please make sure you go check that out on InsideTheHashes.com and all on our social media and on our podcast as well. So thank you guys so much for checking us out. I'm Jerome Jones. We got Avery Collins. We got Derek and Darren. Thank you guys. I did it on purpose that time.
It'll be Darius next week, hopefully.
Thank you guys for checking us out. We appreciate everything, and we'll see you next time. Peace.